38 seconds. In the grand sweeping theater of Washington politics, 38 seconds is usually nothing. It is a cleared throat. It is the shuffling of papers. It is a politician stalling for time while a staffer hands them a note. But on this particular morning, inside room 2141 of the Rayburn House office building, 38 seconds was the exact amount of time it took for an impenetrable fortress of political defense to completely and visibly collapse. What the nation witnessed was not a routine oversight hearing. It wasn't the familiar, exhausting choreography where politicians ask questions for television soundbites and witnesses deploy heavily engineered phrases they have rehearsed for weeks in mock hearing rooms. This was the rarest of events in modern political history, an airtight, inescapable trap snapping shut in real time. And the question that now hangs over the highest echelons of American power is brutally simple. What happens when the nation's top law enforcement official is forced to listen to his own voice, played back in a room full of microphones, and realizes he cannot deny a single word? To understand the absolute devastation of those 38 seconds, you have to look past the political theater and understand the architecture of an ambush, and the man who designed this one was Congressman Ted Lieu. If you watch congressional hearings, you know the rhythm. It is a sterile game. Politicians ask questions they already know the answers to. Witnesses flanked by high-priced legal counsel dodge those questions with a standardized vocabulary of evasion. I do not recall. I cannot confirm the specifics of that timeline. That matter falls under internal review. It is a dance designed to exhaust the clock. In Congress, time expires. But Ted Lieu did not walk into room 2141 to watch the clock. He walked in with a device the size of a smartphone resting in his jacket pocket, backed by 7 weeks of absolute silence and meticulous preparation. You see, before the television cameras, before the political campaigns, Ted Lieu was a JAG officer, a military prosecutor in the United States Air Force. That is the skeleton key to this entire confrontation. Military prosecutors do not operate in a world of political spin. They operate in a world where the rules of evidence are absolute, where a single misstep destroys a case, and where the most devastating weapon in an interrogation is not a raised voice. It is the strategic deployment of the unknown. Prosecutors learn a lesson early in their careers. The kill shot in a cross-examination is never the question itself. It is the exact fraction of a second when a hostile witness realizes you possess a piece of evidence they believed was buried forever. For the first 90 minutes of the hearing, FBI Director Kash Patel looked invincible. He had survived 15 months of intense scrutiny, questions about the terminated Epstein inquiries, questions about political interference. He sat at the witness table like a man who knew the system inside and out, water glass to his right, a stack of briefing papers in front of him, a senior attorney at his flank, ready to whisper guidance if the waters ever got choppy. Patel fielded the initial questions with the effortless, frictionless grace of a seasoned Washington survivor. He reframed inquiries. He narrowed his answers. He deployed the defensive language of the bureaucracy, committing to nothing, offering zero surface area for a follow-up attack. By the second hour, he looked like a man coasting toward the finish line. Then the clock hit 11:19 a.m. Mr. Lieu, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Lieu stood. He didn't have the massive color-coded binders that politicians usually use as props. He didn't have aides rushing up behind him to hand him folders. On the polished wooden desk in front of him sat only 2 items: a single sheet of paper turned face down and a small digital audio player. No one reacted. Desks in Congress are always littered with electronics. Patel's lawyers didn't flinch. The press gallery kept looking at their phones. Director Patel, Lieu began. His voice lacked the performative outrage you usually hear in these rooms. It was flat, clinical, the tone of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. I want to talk to you about a conversation. Instantly, the atmospheric pressure in the room shifted. In legal settings, when a prosecutor pivots from talking about policies or documents to a conversation, the ground rules change. The witness's own words are about to be weaponized. Lieu paused. Specifically, I want to talk about a conversation you had on January 31st, 2025, 11 days after you became FBI director. Human biology is a fascinating thing. Most dates pass through the brain like static, but occasionally a specific date hits the nervous system with the weight of an anvil, and the body reacts before the conscious mind can stop it. Patel shifted. It was microscopic, the kind of movement the television cameras miss, but an interrogator tracks like a heat signature. Do you recall that date? Lieu asked. Patel leaned into his microphone, his voice smooth, heavily protected by his rehearsed armor. Congressman, I have conversations on many dates in the course of my duties. I would need additional context to identify any specific exchange. A classic stall, not a lie. just a demand for the investigator to show their cards. Lieu nodded. He did not argue. He simply provided the context. On January 31, 2025, at approximately 8:14 p.m., you were inside the J. Edgar Hoover building. According to security access logs, you entered a 7th-floor conference room designated for director-level sensitive discussions. You remained in that room for 47 minutes? Do you have any recollection of that evening? Now, the physical tells were becoming obvious. Patel's right hand dragged slowly toward the edge of the table. His lead attorney shifted his weight, muscles tensing, preparing to jump in. Congressman, Patel answered carefully, his words measured by the millimeter. The specifics of internal discussions conducted in sensitive facilities are not something I can characterize in an open setting. Another stall. He was hiding behind the shield of classified protocol. Lieu placed his hand on the face-down piece of paper. He still didn't turn it over. I am not asking you to characterize the discussion. I am asking whether you recall being in that building, in that room, on that evening, yes or no. For 4 excruciating seconds, Kash Patel said absolutely nothing. 4 seconds in a dead quiet room feels like an hour. I was in the building frequently during that period. Patel finally said, I cannot confirm or deny the specific location you are describing. That was it. That was the lock on the cage snapping shut. Lieu turned his head toward the committee chair. For the record, I am about to play a 34-second audio recording obtained by my office through a confidential source and authenticated by 2 independent forensic audio analysts whose certifications have been submitted to this committee. Chaos immediately sparked at the witness table. Patel's attorney was half out of his chair before Lieu finished the sentence. Mr. Chairman, I must object to the introduction of any recording without prior disclosure to opposing counsel and without an established chain of custody. It was a desperate move, a firewall thrown up in a panic, but the chairman shut it down immediately. The documentation was submitted. The objection was overruled. You may proceed, the chairman said. Ted Lieu reached down. He pressed play. What echoed through the speakers of room 2141 was not the grainy, distorted audio of a wiretap. There was no static. There was no background hum of a busy street or the crackle of a bad phone connection. It was terrifyingly pristine. It was the distinct, acoustically deadened sound of a secure conference room. Anyone who has ever held a clearance knows that sound. Rooms built to absorb voice frequencies. Rooms designed so that not a single syllable leaks through the walls. The microphone had captured the air itself, and the voice was unmistakable. For over a year, Kash Patel's voice had been broadcast across the globe. Everyone in the room knew his cadence, the slight flattening of the vowels, the clipped, controlled delivery. There were only 7 words on the tape, 7 words spoken in the hushed, gravelly tone of a man who believes he is enveloped in absolute secrecy. Trump told me to bury it, all of it. Click. Lieu stopped the recording. He didn't let it run a second longer than necessary. Then came the silence. A congressional hearing room is never actually quiet. There is the hum of air conditioning, the rapid clicking of camera shutters, the scratching of reporters' pens, the rustle of staffers moving behind the dais. But at 11:22 a.m., a total vacuum descended on the room. Reporters froze. Camera operators stood perfectly still. Lawmakers stared down from their elevated seats, completely paralyzed, and at the epicenter of this silence sat the director of the FBI. His hands were splayed flat on the wooden table. His shoulders had locked into a rigid, unnatural posture. It wasn't the aggressive tension of a fighter preparing to counterpunch. It was the physiological freeze response of a human being whose brain has just collided with an unsurvivable reality. His breathing became shallow. He didn't look at his lawyers. He didn't look at Ted Lieu. He stared straight ahead into the middle distance. In behavioral analysis, stillness is often a louder confession than speech. When a human being is fabricating a lie, they move, they adjust their tie, they look up, they shift their weight. But when a human being realizes they are trapped by an undeniable truth, they freeze. They go perfectly still, praying the predator does not see them. Lieu let him sit in it. He let the silence stretch, forcing every person in the room to look at the man sitting at the table. Finally, Lieu stepped back to the microphone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. Director Patel, did you hear that the way I heard it? It seems like a simple question. It is not. It is a legal anchor. It establishes for the permanent record that the witness cannot later claim the audio was garbled or misunderstood. Patel's jaw tightened. He said nothing. I am going to ask you one question, Lieu continued, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the terrifying patience of a hangman, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer, because you are under oath, and because what you say in the next 30 seconds will be entered into the congressional record permanently. Lieu. Locked eyes with the director. Is the voice on that recording your voice? Patel's mouth opened. For a split second, it looked like his instinct to survive through sheer denial was going to take over. But before a sound could leave his throat, his lead attorney stood up so fast his heavy leather chair skidded backward across the carpet. Congressman. The lawyer barked. My client cannot authenticate or respond to a recording of unknown provenance in a public setting without the opportunity to review the full context of the material. Lieu didn't even blink. He looked at the lawyer with the exhausted patience of a man who has heard every trick in the book. Counselor, Lieu said softly, I asked your client whether that is his voice. That is a yes or no question about something he has known his entire life. There was the trap, fully illuminated. Lieu wasn't asking for context. He wasn't asking what the words meant. He just asked, is that you? If Patel says no, he is calling two independent, court-certified forensic audio experts liars, experts whose findings can and will be tested in a perjury trial within hours. If he says yes, he admits to receiving a direct, corrupt order from the president to destroy an investigation. Lieu turned his attention back to the table. Director Patel, is that your voice? The silence that followed wasn't shock anymore. It was desperate, high-speed calculation. Patel was running the algorithms in his head, lie and face a perjury indictment, tell the truth and end his career and potentially face obstruction charges. Patel leaned forward. His voice had lost its confident resonance. It was thin, hollow. Congressman, I am not going to comment on the authenticity of a recording I have not had the opportunity to review with counsel in an appropriate setting. It was a refusal, and in the theater of the law, a refusal is a neon sign pointing straight to guilt. Lieu finally reached down and picked up the single piece of paper he had kept face down for 20 minutes. He flipped it over. It wasn't a notepad. It was a certified transcript, stamped, dated, and logged. Director Patel. This transcript has been authenticated by the same two forensic analysts who verified the audio. At the bottom of the transcript is a location marker corresponding to conference room 7C in the J. Edgar Hoover building, the exact room you just told this committee you could not confirm or deny being in. For the first time since the trap was sprung, Patel's eyes darted sideways. He looked at his lawyer. It was a micro-expression, lasting less than a second, but to every investigator watching, it was the white flag. When a witness looks at their lawyer instead of the interrogator, it means their personal defenses have failed. They are begging the system to save them, but the system couldn't save him. Lieu had built an inescapable ladder of logic, and Patel was standing on the top rung with nowhere to jump. Lieu methodically read Patel's past statements back to him, statements made under oath, statements swearing that the FBI operated completely free of political interference, statements promising the American people that the Epstein investigation was untainted. You have told Congress the FBI is independent, Lieu said, his voice ringing. Through the absolute silence of the room, you told the public the Epstein investigation was not influenced by politics, and yet a forensic recording captures your voice stating that the president told you to bury it. Lieu let the word hang. Bury, in law enforcement, you do not use the word bury when you mean review. You do not use it when you mean audit. You use the word bury when you are talking about putting a corpse in the ground so it is never found again. If those 7 words are yours, Lieu continued, bringing the moral weight of the moment crashing down on the room, then they describe a directive from the President of the United States to suppress an ongoing federal investigation. Imagine being one of the young women who came forward in the Epstein case, cooperating with investigators. Reliving trauma, only to find out that somewhere inside the system designed to protect you, someone ordered the truth to be buried. Lieu locked his eyes onto the witness one last time. Director Patel, if those words were spoken by you, then every statement you have made to Congress is subject to review. On the evening of January 31, 2025, did someone from the Trump administration instruct you to bury the Epstein investigation? Nobody breathed. Then the lead defense attorney stood up. He didn't shout. He placed his hands on the table, leaned into the microphone, and changed the course of American history. Congressman, at this time, my client invokes his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and will not answer that question or any subsequent questions derived from the recording you have introduced. It was over. The Fifth Amendment is a constitutional right. It is not legally an admission of guilt, but politically, culturally, historically. When the director of the FBI refuses to answer whether he was ordered to destroy an investigation involving one of the most prolific abuse rings in global history because the answer might put him in prison, the silence is deafening. Ted Lieu didn't gloat. He simply looked at the committee chair, requested the subpoenas for the full 47-minute recording and all communications, and yielded his time. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere, millions of views, legal analysts scrambling across networks. A structural earthquake in the foundation of the justice system. The defense of bureaucratic language had been shattered by 34 seconds of undeniable, unspinnable reality. The question facing the country now isn't whether those words were spoken. The forensics prove they were. The question is what happens to a system when the people trusted to guard the law are caught on tape actively trying to bury it. Does the system heal? Or does it collapse under the weight of its own corruption? So I turn it over to you. You've heard the breakdown. You understand the architecture of the trap Lucette and the massive, devastating implications of a Fifth Amendment plea from the head of the FBI. What is your read on the power dynamics in that room? What does a nation do when the architects of justice are compromised? If you appreciate this deep dive into the unseen mechanics of power, tactics, and political warfare, hit the like button right now. It tells the algorithm that real analytical storytelling matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments. How would you have handled that cross-examination? Share this breakdown with anyone who needs to understand the real story behind the headlines. And make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The subpoenas drop in 48 hours, the fallout is spreading, and I will be right here breaking down the patterns of power as they happen. Until next time, stay sharp.